overnight, American forces appear to have hit an Iranian city that is key to the country's nuclear and missile programs. President Trump sharing this video to Truth Social, showing these fireballs just lighting up the sky after the U.S. reportedly dropped a bunker buster bomb on a weapons depot. This comes as the president threatens to destroy Iran's energy plants and desalination water systems and is inching closer to putting boots on the ground. Even as he ramps up his military push, the president says the talks are going well. And joining me now, I have retired Navy Rear Admiral and former Deputy Director for Global Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Michael Hewitt, and also former Deputy National Security Advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney and Senior Fellow for National Security at the Heritage Foundation, Steve Yates. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you. Admiral, we're just a few minutes away from this next presser with Hegseth and General Kane. What are you expecting to hear as we now have 50,000 troops in the region and we're less than a week away from Trump's deadline for Iran to reopen the strait?
I imagine what we'll hear is an update on the conflict itself and the targets that they're now going after. As expected, the targets they're now going after are much harder to find. They're deeply buried. They're very covert in their locations. And so as we move through the campaign, and again, the goals are to eliminate their nuclear program, eliminate their Navy, their Air Force, and their missile program. And I would say that over the last 30 days, we've met all of the metrics there. We will continue to do those things as we go forward. While the diplomatic channels are happening, the Straits of Hormuz are obviously a separate issue that needs to be addressed. And the troops on the ground are there for every contingency that I think will come out of this negotiation over the next 5 days.
And to give the president optionality there, we're told. Steve, there's also this brand new exclusive reporting from the Wall Street Journal that Trump has told his inner circle he's willing to end the war without reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and that he would reportedly press allies in Europe and the Gulf to take the lead on reopening it instead. Is that a smart move? And what clues or insights will you be watching for in today's briefing?
Well, I wouldn't take it at face value. We have a lot of things asserted about what the president allegedly is thinking and is about to do, and he himself will contribute to that because it gives him options and he's trying to set the information environment. He's been pretty consistent throughout this whole process that in every conflict, he's trying to press allies with skin in the game or closer to the threat in a particular region to step in and do more. And I am sure that when it comes to freedom of navigation in those waterways, he's going to want the Arab states that are our allies and have been attacked and are now very, very clearly against the current regime in Iran, to have them play somewhat of a role on free flow of goods going through that near geography. So it could be part negotiation that he put that out there. But he also talks about destroying the civilian infrastructure in Iran. I hope it doesn't come to that because that would make reconstruction post-conflict more difficult. But I think he's also trying to make a point that his time is not unlimited and he still does have options. And I think the best path is if this negotiation works. But as was suggested by the other guest, he's trying to make clear that he has options no matter which way that goes.
Yeah, we'll see if any sort of deal gets reached before next Monday when that newest grace period comes to an end. If I could just read off this new Truth Social post that was just sent out within the last 10 minutes from President Trump. He said, all of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the U.S. We have plenty. And number two, build up some delayed courage. Go to the Strait and just take it. You're going to have to start learning how to fight for yourself. Admiral, your reaction to that and how other countries receive that message?
I think the president is somewhat frustrated that the Straits of Hormuz really impact the Europeans, China, and the Asian market much more so than it impacts the United States. And so while his frustration at lack of support for the military campaign is obvious, he didn't really need Europe or NATO to do his military campaign. What he needs them to do is step in and open up these international waterways to the free flow of commerce, which is not tied to Iran's war. It's tied to Iran's belligerence and Iran's behavior. And so Trump will continue to do the things he needs to do, take Kharg Island, hold them hostage in terms of their economic commerce. But he's looking for the Europeans to come in and step in, open up these straits and keep them open, because while he may eliminate their ability to constitute war, he can't eliminate their ability to create havoc in the Straits. So we need the Europeans' help. And I think the last thing I would mention is the two countries that are most rooting us on right now are Israel and Saudi Arabia. So that's an alliance that tells you everything you need to know about the purpose and the end state of this war.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.